Hi everyone, this is Sociocultural Theory according to Lev Vygotsky. Hello, I'm Alexandra Touzinsky and I will be presenting on the Sociocultural Theory according to Lev Vygotsky with its influences on education and its impact around the world. Vygotsky is considered the Mozart of psychology. So similar to the famous composer Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, Vygotsky applied his genius early in life to many different areas. But also, unfortunately, like Mozart, Vygotsky died young, at the age of 37, after a battle with tuberculosis. Let's take a look at his background. Vygotsky was born on November 17, 1896, in the town of Orsha, Belarus. During his childhood, he was homeschooled and then attended a private Jewish school. He won the Jewish lottery and was able to attend the University of Moscow. He began studying medicine, switched to law, but ultimately dropped out, thus not obtaining a university degree. Continuing in his background, in 1924, Vygotsky received an invitation to become a research fellow at the Psychological Institute in Moscow. And then in 1925, he completed his dissertation entitled The Psychology of Art, though this would not be published until 1960. Also in 1925, he was hospitalized for tuberculosis, and this started his battle with that disease. In 1929, all the way through to 1934, he went through some major self-criticism and did lots of traveling, and through that was reconstructing many of his theories. In 1934, he died of tuberculosis on June 11th at the age of 37 in Moscow, Soviet Union. Here is a compilation of his works. They range from the year 1925 until the year he died in 1934. These works are used for psychology, the development of children, and in a lot of educational works as well, and are great references. Immediately after his death, Vygotsky was proclaimed one of the leading psychologists in the Soviet Union. However, given his early death, he would never finish certain theories and would never know the impact he had on the world of psychology. This message was found in a notebook of his right before his death. This is the final thing I have done in psychology, and I will, like Moses, die at the summit, having glimpsed the promised land, but without setting foot on it. Farewell, dear creations, the rest is silence. So now let's take a look at sociocultural theory. According to our textbook, it's the central thesis of sociocultural theory is that human development results from the dynamic interaction between developing persons and their surrounding society. There are many components that make up Vygotsky's sociocultural theory. Some listed here are culture-specific tools, language, writing, reading, art, maps, diagrams, or private speech, being able to internalize and recognizing cognitive thought. Social interactions, this could be with peers, colleagues, with teachers and mentors. He also emphasized the role of language and how that was one of the greatest roles in his theory. And lastly, social factors, culture, environment, society. Every child, with the guidance of a skilled member of society, will develop regardless if the child is schooled or not. This is the foundation of his theory. And these skilled members can be parents, teachers, or society as an entity. These are considered knowledgeable others, right? More knowledgeable others, the MKOs, and through their skill can teach young children the cultures and ideas. So these mentors teach the children about culture, ideas, and skills through a process he called guided participation. And this process allows for the thinking load to be shared. So there is a team effort there. There's collaboration between mentor and mentee. So looking into guided participation, here are a few examples. The assistance can be either physical or mental. So first example says, a mother sitting with her toddler singing, "Ba ba black sheep, have you any wool? Yes sir, yes sir." And at this point the mother pauses and the child then sings loudly, "3 bags full." This kind of back and forth guides that child to the words that would be filling in for the rest of that song. Another example, a 6-year-old lost a toy and asks her father for help. The father asks her where she last saw the toy. The child says, "I can't remember." He asks a series of questions. Did you have it in your room? Did you have it outside? To each question, the child answers no. But when he asks in the car, she says, "I think so," and finds the toy in the car. So at no point did the father tell her where that toy was, but guided her to the answer of finding it herself. Next, we'll talk about zone of proximal development. It's an imaginary area surrounding the learner that contains the skills, knowledge, and concepts that are close or proximal to being grasped but not yet reached. A definition was also found in our textbook. So in this diagram, you see the zone of proximal development and scaffolding. So here we start with what I can learn on my own. And depending on the subject or discipline, this can be smaller or larger. From there, the ZPD, or what I can learn with help, encompasses what I can learn on my own and will cover a broader portion of the discipline or subject. This is where knowledgeable others, technology, and tools also come into play and help with that greater learning. The last part will be beyond my reach. So there's a fine line between what a child can achieve and then what's considered to be out of their reach or too difficult. Through assessment, mentors engage with their students or mentees within their zone. So they meet them where they are. That's a refined skill that teachers have, finding where that student is in their skill level in that specific discipline. New knowledge is then obtained through a process of joint construction. So coming together and working and collaborating towards a goal or a setting. So things to avoid would be boredom or failure, right? A student is going to lose interest in that ZPD if they're not finding it to be challenging enough or if they're not finding success. A mentor should be sensitive to support or freedom. So in this given time and place, do they need to give that mental or physical support, or do they need to give the child some freedom, taking off the training wheels? Other people and equipment can also teach children. So we talk about like societal or environmental learning that can happen. Scaffolding. This is temporary support that is tailored to a learner's needs and abilities and aimed at helping the learner master the next task in a given learning process. Culture is important because behaviors and interactions can differ from culture to culture. Parents usually use scaffolding for what they deem to be important. So for example, being well behaved while a book is being read to them, or noticing emotions and interacting when a book is being read to them. That would also be an example of cultural differences as well. Here are some examples of scaffolding. So encouraging children to look both ways before crossing the street and pointing out speeding cars, trucks, and such, so that the child also knows the reasoning for looking both ways before crossing. Letting a young child stir the cake batter. During this process, you might also cover their hand on the handle of the spoon and guiding the participation so that the child can be part of something, a greater process. And then being attentive and quiet during story time, going back to that societal expectation of what a child should be doing during story time. Here's a personal example of scaffolding that I use in my classroom. So I teach middle school orchestra, and note reading can oftentimes be a great challenge for students. So note reading in music can be difficult, especially as a child learns new notes and then must also apply those new notes to their instrument. So to help separate the familiar notes from new notes, sometimes I will color code them for them. Now, making sure that I don't actually cover up the note itself, but provide a color code aid to separate familiar with new. So in this example, this is Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star for a violinist. The D string notes are the ones that are already familiar, and I've color-coded them green. And you can see in this example that the majority of the notes are already familiar. However, the new notes being introduced are A string notes, and I've marked those in yellow. This then gives the child an area of focus, but also lets them rely on what they already know and build on that. So this provides support to lead the student to success. You can also use the concept of chunking, right? So here I only have them playing the first two lines. Only once they've found success in those first two lines would I then move on to the next two. I could also then show a child that lines 1 and 2 are exactly the same as lines 5 and 6. And then we build on previous knowledge and skills. Another example is vibrato. So here there are 5 steps that this website goes through. Understanding the basic motion, practicing the basic motion. In step 3, you then actually transfer the motion to, in this case, the cello. And step 4, putting the right and left hand together. And step 5, removing the scaffold. So I'm going to take us to the site so that we can look through those together. So using scaffolding to teach your students vibrato. Vibrato is when you bend the pitch to kind of soften the tone and add like phrasing to melodies. So using Vygotsky's theory, here you can see social interaction, the more knowledgeable other, right, the MKO, and then the zone of proximal development. So taking a child through the scaffolding to take the theory into practice. So going down here are the actual steps for learning vibrato. Again, understanding that basic motion, right? Using something that that the child can then shake. So in this example, a filled tic-tac box is strapped to the left hand with a rubber band. And then you practice the motion in step 2, right? So shaking the hand back and forth and creating this like rhythmic pulse with the like maraca sounding tic-tac box. Now you would then transfer that motion to the cello. So again, we're not playing any notes, we're just taking that motion of vibrato and applying it to the cello. So in this video you can see focusing on that maraca sound, keeping a rhythmic pulse going on the cello itself. Now, step 4 would be putting the right hand and left hand together. In cello, the left hand plays the notes on the string and the right hand pulls the bow across the strings. So you would continue that maraca sound in your left hand and then try to pull the bow across the string with your right. Step 5, the last one, would be removing the scaffold. So have the students practice all of those steps 1 through 4 with that box of Tic Tacs, but then removing those box of Tic Tacs and continuing with steps 1 through 4 without that aid. Great. So going back to the presentation, next we'll talk about some criticisms. Though he is considered one of the great theorists in child development, there are some criticisms to his ideas. So some of the major criticisms. There is little description of the process of development or an explanation of development. So many of the other theorists in child development are like Erikson or Piaget, and they have these stages that they explain that children will go through, and their theories are very much based on these stages. Vygotsky doesn't have those. His description is more of how a child will develop throughout their years versus stages that they will enter and then move on from. Another criticism would be that ZPD is very vague, so that zone of proximal development doesn't give much detail as to what that could look like. How far should you push a student? What is not pushing them enough into that ZPD, right? It's very vague. And then lastly, this theory is difficult to study due to cultural, historical contexts. So if we think back on like the guided participation examples, there are different reactions or societal norms from one culture to the other. And then also through history, things change. So those contexts can make it difficult to study. All right, and lastly, let's look at some influences. Then Vygotsky, despite having died before many of his theories were fully developed, has had a great influence on education and how we view child development. ZPD, or scaffolding, they have played a crucial role in supporting learning more effectively and led to the understandings of differentiation and the role of collaborative learning. So ZPD and scaffolding, those are both used in education all over the world, and they are a skill that many veteran teachers use and also fine so that it becomes better and better throughout their learning. Apprenticeship learning, the foundation of many education programs and practices. Taking something as simple as learning how to tie your shoe to math tutoring or the PSAT. Cultural tools for thinking. This is language itself, writing, arts, maps, signs, diagrams, music, like all of that contributes to the thinking and the cognitive development of children. But you also have cognitive conflict. So being able to deal with those challenges. How do they overcome the thinking process or maybe the lack of skills needed for a certain cognitive display? And lastly, play, a means of identifying solutions to problems, including social problems, and developing an understanding of rules. I think back on the toys that we evaluated earlier on and observed in this class, and those situational plays can really be beneficial to children, like the Fisher-Price kitchen or the Fisher-Price taco truck. And that gives them certain problems that might arise, but also situational awareness of that's appropriate to their society. I'm ending with a quote that I found from Vygotsky, which says, "Somehow our society has formed a one-sided view of the human personality. And for some reason, everyone understood giftedness and talent only as it applied to the intellect. But it is possible not only to be talented in one's thoughts, but also to be talented in one's feelings as well." I thought this really rang true to his belief that the development really is socioculture, like your interactions, people around you, your society, your culture, and how all of that together makes you the person that you are. Thank you very much. This has been my presentation on Vygotsky and his sociocultural theory. Here are the references used for this presentation. No.